Meyer made the announcement this morning in Polk County. The arrests were the result of a 7-day sting named Fool Around and Find Out Again. The sting, led by the Polk County Sheriff's Office, used.
Mike. So Jim and Liz, the women who work inside these houses are threatened with violence if they try to leave, and they are victims of human trafficking, no doubt about it. What's hard to believe is it's oftentimes women.
On paper, it looked legal. A shipping company, a customs brokerage office, a labor staffing firm with clean invoices and polished websites, containers moving through a Florida port like thousands of others every week. But one barcode kept appearing in places it shouldn't. At first, agents thought it was a clerical mistake. Then they found the same code tied to missing workers, shell companies, offshore payments, and a warehouse that officially did not exist. By the time the FBI and IC moved in, the number had already climbed to 122 victims. And the money trail was pointing towards something much larger than a trafficking ring. It was pointing toward a $1.7 billion system. The case began quietly in Tampa, Florida, inside a small field office where an analyst noticed a pattern in port entry logs. 3 containers had been flagged for secondary inspection, then cleared within minutes. Nothing unusual by itself. Ports run on speed. Delays cost money. Paperwork gets corrected. Seals get replaced. But these containers had something strange in common. They were all connected to a company called Marivex Global Logistics. Marivex claimed to move seafood equipment, refrigeration parts, and industrial cleaning supplies. Their paperwork looked perfect. Too perfect. Every customs form had the same structure. Every supplier invoice had identical language. Even the signatures looked like they had been copied from the same digital template. Then one analyst pulled the employee records for a subcontractor tied to Marivex. That was when the first crack appeared. 17 workers listed at one seafood processing facility had no recent tax filings, no active addresses, and no known relatives in the United States. But according to payroll records, they were earning full-time wages, and every check was being deposited into accounts controlled by the same payment processor. That processor was owned by a man named Adrian Vale. At that point, Vale was not a suspect. He was barely a footnote, a former shipping executive, a donor to port development charities. A man who appeared in local business magazines talking about modernizing supply chains. He smiled in photos next to city officials. He funded a youth soccer league in Miami. And according to every public record, he was just another logistics entrepreneur riding the post-pandemic shipping boom. But federal investigators noticed something about Adrian Vale that changed the direction of the case. He never appeared where the business actually happened. Not at the port. Not at the warehouses. Not at the staffing office. Not at the banks. He only appeared where trust was being built. And that mattered. Because the more agents looked, the more Marivex seemed less like a company and more like a mask. The first real witness came from Fort Myers. Her name was Lucia. She was 26, originally from Honduras, and she had been promised hotel work near Naples. A recruiter told her she would clean rooms, earn steady pay, and send money home within weeks. Instead, her phone was taken the night she arrived. Her documents disappeared. She was moved 3 times in 6 days, first to a crowded rental house, then to a refrigerated warehouse near Lakeland, then to a seafood plant where she worked until her hands split from cold water and chemicals. She was told she owed $18,000. Transportation fees, housing fees, placement fees, security fees. Every week, the number changed. Every week, the debt grew. And every time she asked to leave, someone reminded her that the police would not believe her. That was the first human story agents could prove. But it was not the first victim. Lucia gave investigators a detail that seemed small at the time. She said the men who moved her never used names. They used colors. Blue group, red group, silver group. And on the wristband she had been forced to wear during transport, there was a printed code. The same code found in the port records. Suddenly, the case was no longer about suspicious payroll. It was about a pipeline. FBI analysts began mapping every shipment tied to Marivex Global Logistics over 18 months. Tampa, Miami, Port Everglades, Jacksonville, then outside Florida, Savannah, Houston, New Orleans, Baltimore. The pattern stretched across the Gulf and up the East Coast, but the Florida port was the hub. That was where workers disappeared into vans, where cargo records were altered, and where certain containers moved faster than they should have. ICE Homeland Security investigations joined the case after a separate lead surfaced in Miami. A group of undocumented workers had been found living behind a garment warehouse, sleeping on cardboard under security cameras. They were not chained. That was what made the system harder to see. There were no dramatic locks on doors. No visible guards standing outside with weapons. No obvious cages. The control was quieter. Debt, fear, immigration threats, stolen documents, fake police warnings, locked phones, constant movement. A victim could walk out the front door and still have nowhere to go. That was how the network survived. It hid inside ordinary systems. Apartments, payroll apps, staffing contracts, port badges, delivery routes, hotel laundry services, produce farms. Every layer looked normal until agents connected it to the layer beneath. Then came the first visual break in the case. A surveillance team followed a refrigerated box truck leaving the port at 3:18 a.m. It did not go to the seafood facility listed in the manifest. It drove inland for nearly 2 hours, headlights off on smaller roads, then pulled behind an abandoned citrus packing warehouse outside Plant City. Agents watching through long lenses saw the rear door open. Not cargo, people. 8 of them stepped down slowly, wrapped in silver emergency blankets, blinking under the warehouse floodlights. One collapsed before reaching the loading dock. That image changed the tone inside the task force. This was no longer a financial investigation with possible labor violations. This was an active rescue operation. But the agents still had a problem. If they moved too soon, they might save only one location and lose the network. So they waited. Not because they wanted to, because they needed the whole map. Over the next 6 weeks, investigators pulled bank records, port access logs, phone warrants, and shipping manifests. The numbers grew ugly. 47 shell companies, 19 warehouses, 6 staffing agencies, over 300 bank accounts, payments moving through Florida, Delaware, Panama, the British Virgin Islands, and one private investment firm in Luxembourg. The total estimated value of the network, $1.7 billion. Not all of it was cash. Some of it was property. Some was business equity. Some was hidden in inflated service contracts. Some was buried in loans that never needed to be repaid. But the money moved with precision. And behind that precision was someone who understood enforcement. That was the mid-twist. The network was not just avoiding federal systems. It was anticipating them. Every time agents placed a location under surveillance, activity slowed within 48 hours. Every time IC requested certain port records, one internal database showed delayed access. Every time a warehouse appeared close to exposure, workers were moved before the next morning. At first, investigators suspected a corrupt local employee. Then they found something worse. Someone inside the port's compliance office had been feeding Marivex inspection alerts. Not every alert. Just enough. A container number here. A gate schedule there. A note that a customs team had requested a second look. The insider was not running the operation, but he was protecting its timing. His name was Daniel Mercer, a senior compliance supervisor with 21 years at the port. Mercer had a clean record. He trained younger staff. He knew which inspections were random, which were targeted, and which were serious. And he knew how to make a delay look like bureaucracy. When agents searched his financial records, they found no mansion, no flashy cars, no obvious payoff. That almost made them move on. Then a forensic accountant noticed payments to a college savings account under Mercer's sister's name. Small payments at first, then larger. Then one deposit for $240,000 routed through a consulting firm tied to Adrian Vale. Now Vale was no longer a footnote. He was the gravitational center. But proving it would not be easy. Vale did not send the threatening texts. He did not drive the vans. He did not appear in warehouse footage. He did not sign the fake debt contracts. Everything between him and the victims was layered through managers, recruiters, drivers, accountants, and subcontractors. He had built the system so that everyone below him looked guilty, while he looked distant. The FBI called it compartmentalized control. Each person knew only enough to do their part. Recruiters believed they were filling labor shortages. Drivers believed they were moving undocumented workers for cash. Warehouse supervisors believed they were managing debt labor. Accountants believed they were processing gray market payroll. And the people at the top pretended they were only coordinating logistics. But one person knew more. Her name was Naomi Chun. She had worked as a financial controller for one of Vale's companies in Coral Gables. For 7 months, she approved payments labeled as labor stabilization expenses. At first, she thought it was code for temporary staffing. Then she noticed the same workers being billed across multiple sites at the same time. One man appeared on payroll in Tampa, Jacksonville, and Miami during the same week. One woman was listed as working 116 hours in 3 days. And several worker ID numbers were connected to people who had vanished from company housing. Naomi started copying files. Slowly, carefully. Not enough to trigger an audit. She saved spreadsheets, wire records, internal messages, and one encrypted folder labeled Port Priority. Inside that folder were photos of badges, port schedules, inspection memos, and a document that listed human beings as units. That was the word that shook the room when prosecutors saw it. Units. Not employees. Not workers. Not people. Units. The task force now had enough to prepare raids, but the operation had to be simultaneous. If one site was hit early, the rest would scatter. So federal teams built a strike plan covering multiple Florida cities. Tampa, Miami, Hialeah, Plant City, Lakeland, Fort Lauderdale, Jacksonville. FBI tactical teams would secure offices and data servers. ICE HSI would handle victim recovery and immigration-sensitive interviews. DEA joined because several warehouses were also suspected of moving synthetic opioids through the same transport routes. DOJ prosecutors prepared sealed indictments. Local police were briefed only hours before the operation. The fewer people who knew, the safer the victims were. The raid began before sunrise, not with sirens, with silence. At one warehouse near Lakeland, agents cut power to the outer cameras and moved through a side entrance behind stacked pallets. Inside, they found rows of bunk beds made from plywood, a single bathroom, a locked cabinet full of passports, and on the wall, a whiteboard with names divided into color groups: blue, red, silver. Lucia had been telling the truth. At a second location in Hialeah, ICE agents entered a laundry facility where workers were already on the floor sorting hotel sheets. Some froze when they saw the jackets. Some ran. Not because they were criminals, because they had been told federal agents would deport them immediately. One woman hid beneath a metal folding table, shaking so hard she could not speak. An agent knelt down and repeated the same phrase in Spanish until she looked up. "You are not in trouble." That was the moment the case stopped being numbers. At the port itself, FBI agents moved into Merivex's brokerage office. The front room looked ordinary. Reception desk, coffee machine, framed shipping licenses. But behind a locked interior door, they found the second visual discovery. A server rack humming inside a climate-controlled room, hidden behind shelves of archived invoices. The servers were not listed on any company asset report. A technician pulled the drives while agents photographed everything. Within hours, forensic teams found routing logs, worker movement schedules, debt ledgers, and coded references to payments made for silence, priority clearance, and asset relocation. Asset relocation meant moving victims. Silence meant bribes. Priority clearance meant the port insider. Then came the hidden room. At the Plant City warehouse, AK-9 alerted near a false wall behind stacked citrus crates. Agents removed the boards and found a narrow storage space with bottled water, burner phones, and emergency cash. There were also children's shoes. That detail never made it into the first press briefing. But inside the task force, it changed everything. By the end of the day, 122 victims had been recovered. Men and women from Honduras, Guatemala, Haiti, Venezuela, Mexico, and the Philippines. Some had been in the system for weeks. Others, for more than a year. They were taken to secure locations, interviewed by trained specialists, given medical care, food, clean clothing, and access to legal advocates. The government announced arrests across Florida and 3 other states. Drivers, recruiters, warehouse managers, shell company officers, financial handlers. But Adrian Vale was not at his home. Not in Coral Gables. Not at his office. Not on his yacht. For 6 hours, it looked like the central figure had vanished. Then agents found a flight plan. A private jet scheduled to depart from a small executive airport north of Miami. Destination, Aruba. Passenger name, not Adrian Vale. But the passport photo matched. FBI agents reached the aircraft while it was still on the ground. Vale was sitting in the rear cabin wearing a navy sweater, no tie, phone in hand, calm enough to look annoyed. According to agents on scene, he did not ask what the charges were. He asked which office had signed the warrant. That question told prosecutors something important. Vale still thought this was about procedure. He thought the system could be slowed, challenged, buried, negotiated. But this time, the system had arrived all at once. When agents searched his bag, they found 2 passports, 3 encrypted phones, and a handwritten list of names. One of those names belonged to Daniel Mercer. Another belonged to a banking consultant in Miami. A third belonged to Naomi Chun. That meant Vale knew she had talked, or at least suspected it. The final realization came from the servers. For months, investigators had believed Marivex was the core business. It wasn't. Marivex was just the visible layer. The real structure was a network of labor control companies feeding industries that needed cheap, invisible work. Seafood, construction cleanup, agricultural packing, hotel laundry, warehouse sorting, private catering, landscaping. The trafficking ring was not built around one illegal market. It was built around demand. Anywhere a company wanted labor that was cheap, fast, replaceable, and hard to trace, Vale's network offered a solution. That was why the money reached $1.7 billion. Not because one warehouse was profitable. Because the system was everywhere. And the most disturbing part was how ordinary it looked from the outside. Invoices were paid. Contracts were signed. Trucks arrived on time. Hotels got clean sheets. Produce reached grocery shelves. Construction sites stayed on schedule. The machine worked because most people only saw the final product. Not the person behind it. Not the woman sleeping on a warehouse floor. Not the man whose paycheck went into an account he could not access. Not the teenager told his family would be hurt if he tried to leave. One victim, a 19-year-old named Mateo, told investigators he had stopped counting days. He had been recruited for roofing work in Florida, then moved between job sites under different supervisors. Every time he asked about payment, he was shown a debt ledger. Food, mattress, van ride, gloves, work boots, all charged against him. When agents found him, he had $11 in his pocket and a torn photo of his younger brother folded inside his shoe. He said he kept it there because it was the only thing they had not taken. That is the human cost of a system like this. It does not always announce itself with violence. Sometimes it wears a uniform polo. Sometimes it sends invoices. Sometimes it sponsors charity events. Sometimes it sits in a port office with a badge and a clean record. In the weeks after the raid, DOJ prosecutors moved to freeze assets tied to Vail's companies, bank accounts, properties, vehicles, equipment, cryptocurrency wallets, private equity holdings. Federal authorities also began auditing companies that had unknowingly or knowingly benefited from the labor pipeline. That question became one of the most uncomfortable parts of the case. Who knew? Who chose not to ask? Who saw prices that were too low, turnaround times that were too fast, staffing that was too available, and decided not to look closer? Because systems like this do not survive on one villain, they survive on distance. The farther away the victim is from the polished business transaction, the easier it becomes to pretend there is no victim at all. Adrian Vail became the face of the indictment. Daniel Mercer became the symbol of corruption. The recruiters and drivers became the operational layer. But the final reveal was bigger than any one person. The trafficking ring was not hidden in darkness. It was hidden in normalcy. That is what made it so dangerous. A federal raid can break doors. It can seize servers. It can rescue 122 people in one day. It can crush bank accounts and expose a $1.7 billion network. But the deeper fight begins after the cameras leave. Because every victim has to rebuild a life. Every shell company has to be unwound. Every corrupt official has to be exposed. Every business that benefited has to be questioned. And every system that rewarded cheap silence has to be forced into the light. The Florida port raid became one of those cases that agents remember differently. Not because of the scale. Not because of the money. Not even because of the arrests. But because of what they found behind the paperwork. A barcode that led to a warehouse. A warehouse that led to a server room. A server room that led to a billionaire network. And a network that led back to a simple, brutal truth. Human trafficking does not always look like kidnapping in an alley. Sometimes it looks like a supply chain. And if a system like this can exist inside institutions people trust, ports, payroll companies, warehouses, staffing firms, then the real question is not just how it happened. The real question is how many people had to look away for it to keep going. And what else is moving through the world right now, hidden behind clean paperwork, waiting for someone to notice the one detail that does not belong.